Okay, so you want to deep dive into this whole Elon Musk thing, right? Like from tech CEO to government reformer, talk about a career change.
Yeah, it is kind of wild. I mean, we've got all these articles here about him basically trying to shrink the entire U.S. government, working with the Trump administration, no less.
It's a lot to unpack. We've got cost cutting, potential conflicts of interest, and enough political drama to fill a whole season of,
And then there's this whole Doge thing.
Doge. Seriously. Like the meme.
I know, right? Sounds crazy, but it's real. The Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, and President Trump's executive order, basically like a presidential directive, has given Doge a ton of power.
So what can they actually do? I mean, what kind of authority does Doge have?
Oh, they can shake things up big time. They can freeze funding, cut staff, even tell other government agencies how to run their shops. It's a pretty big deal.
And they're already running into some roadblocks. One of these articles mentions a federal judge actually blocked Doge from accessing Treasury records.
That's a huge deal. It shows this tension between Doge's goal, efficiency, and the whole system of checks and balances in the U.S. government.
Checks and balances. I'm not sure I'm following.
So basically, each branch of government, like Congress, the president, the courts, they each have ways to limit the power of the others, make sure things don't get out of control.
Ah, okay. So it's this tug of war. Doge wants to do its thing, but these safeguards are there to prevent any part of the government from getting too powerful, right?
Exactly. And that fight is happening right now in courtrooms, in Congress, all over the place.
Okay, so let's talk about the guy at the center of all this. Elon Musk. SpaceX. Tesla. He's always pushing the limits with technology. But now he's a government bureaucrat. That's kind of hard to imagine.
It is a bit of a head scratcher. And it raises some questions about, conflicts of interest. Musk's companies are huge. How can he be impartial when government decisions could directly affect his own businesses?
Yeah, and he's not exactly been shy about sharing his opinions. One article quotes him calling federal workers an unelected fourth unconstitutional branch of government. Pretty strong words.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about how he sees things. He's basically saying government bureaucracy is bloated and needs a serious shakeup. His whole tech background probably plays a big part in that viewpoint.
So he wants to bring that Silicon Valley, move fast and break things mindset to the federal government.
Seems like it. But governing is a little different than developing software.
Right, huge difference. So Doge is all about making the government more efficient. What's the plan? How do they actually want to do that?
Well, Trump says Doge will uncover like $1 trillion in wasteful spending. That's a crazy amount of money.
A trillion? That's more than the entire yearly budget of most countries. Where is all this waste hiding?
That's a good question. And it's not just about like cutting back on paper clips. Some agencies, like USAID, the one that does foreign aid, are facing huge cuts.
These articles mention a lot of concerns about cutting foreign aid programs.
Yeah. I mean, less aid could have a domino effect, not just for the U.S., but for all those people around the world who depend on that help. Raises some ethical questions about the consequences.
So it's this double-edged sword. Massive cost savings on one side, but potential harm to really essential services and programs on the other.
Yeah, very tricky situation. And it's become a major battleground in Washington.
Speaking of which, the articles mention the Democrats aren't happy, calling this a hostile takeover and trying to block Doge every step of the way.
It's a highly partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans have completely different views on the role of government, spending priorities, and how much power the president should have. Doge just throws all that into overdrive.
And Republicans seem to be, well, mostly on board with this whole cost-cutting crusade.
Generally, yeah. They tend to align with Trump and Musk's view of a smaller federal government.
So where do everyday Americans stand on this? Are people pro-Doge or not?
It's mixed. There was a CBS News poll that found some people support Musk's ideas about cutting spending, but others are worried about how much influence he has and those potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah, those concerns about transparency and conflicts of interest keep popping up. It's not just the Democrats who are worried.
Definitely not. There are critics all across the political spectrum who are raising red flags about Doge's operations, especially after that judge blocked their access to financial records.
Makes sense. It's like, how are decisions being made? Who's benefiting? There's a lot we don't know.
Right. That lack of transparency just breeds skepticism and distrust, which is never good, especially when it comes to the government.
Especially since, didn't Musk himself admit that some of the things he said about Doge might be wrong?
He did. Definitely adds to the uncertainty and makes it even more important to really look closely at what Doge is doing.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure. This whole Doge thing feels like this massive experiment playing out in real time. Its mission, the people in charge, the potential impact on the government. There are so many unknowns.
There really are. And the outcome could have huge consequences for the U.S. government and how it interacts with its citizens.
So, where do we go from here?
Well, this story is far from over. Legal battles over Doge's authority will probably keep going. The political fighting will rage on, and Americans will keep trying to figure out what it all means for them.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. But it's important to stay informed because the choices being made today could have lasting effects on all of us.
Exactly. As we dig deeper into these articles, we'll break it all down, look at different points of view, and help you form your own opinions.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We know the key players, the main issues. Now it's time to dive into the specifics.
Right. Let's start with this whole idea of government efficiency. What does it really mean, and how does Doge think it can be achieved? Looking at all these articles about Doge, it seems like it's more than just, like, saving money. It's like a whole different way of thinking about what government even is.
That's interesting. I mean, on the surface, it seems simple enough, right?
Yeah.
Make government leaner, less waste, more efficient. But you're saying there's a deeper layer here.
Exactly. It's like this clash between efficiency and democracy. You want things to run smoothly, no waste, quick decisions. But democracy, it's kind of messy. You need debate, compromise, all those checks and balances to make sure everyone has a voice.
So how do you balance that? Can you really have a government that's both super efficient and truly democratic?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's what Doge is wrestling with right now.
Yeah.
Some folks say that some inefficiency is just the price you pay for a working democracy.
Right. And that judge blocking Doge's access to those treasury records, that kind of proves the point, doesn't it? Those checks and balances working as intended.
Yeah, exactly. Makes you wonder if Doge's push for efficiency might be stepping on those safeguards.
Which brings us back to that whole transparency thing, right? If Doge has too much power, not enough oversight, it could lead to, well, some bad stuff. Abusive power.
No question. And remember, Musk himself said some of his statements about Doge might not be totally accurate. Makes you wonder if they're even using the right info to make decisions.
That's a little unsettling. Hard to know what to believe.
And when things aren't transparent, it's impossible to tell if Doge is actually doing what's best for the people, or if there are other agendas at play.
Yeah, some of these articles called Doge a shadow government operating outside the usual rules.
It's a scary thought. And it just highlights how important it is to demand transparency from those in power. If we don't know how decisions are being made, who's influencing them, then we can't hold anyone accountable.
Seems like that lack of trust in Doge is a big hurdle they need to clear. If they want to be successful, they got to address that.
Definitely. And that means being open about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what their goals actually are.
Right. Prove that they're operating ethically responsibly, not just chasing efficiency no matter the cost.
Exactly. Because ultimately, it's not about making government smaller. It's about making it work better for the people it's supposed to serve.
Okay, we've talked about the potential downsides, but let's be fair. Aren't there some potential benefits to streamlining government, making it run smoother?
Absolutely. I mean, there are definitely areas where the government could be more efficient. Think about all that red tape for small businesses. Cutting through that could help them grow, create jobs.
Right, and making those processes easier for regular people to get the services they need. Less hassle.
Exactly. So the real challenge is to find ways to make things more efficient without sacrificing accountability, transparency, and fairness.
So it's like walking a tightrope. You need this nuanced approach that recognizes how complex government is and how many different needs it has to meet.
Totally. One of the big lessons here is there's no easy answer, no quick fix when it comes to government reform. It takes careful thought, open discussion, and a willingness to adapt as we learn what works and what doesn't.
Speaking of learning, let's get into some specifics. What's Doge actually doing? The articles mentioned cutting waste in government contracts, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. They think there's a lot of taxpayer money being wasted there. They're going through contracts, seeing where costs can be cut, renegotiating terms.
But couldn't that backfire, like lower wages for government contractors, or maybe even worse, quality goods and services?
Those are real risks. And it highlights the importance of doing your homework, really thinking through the consequences before making cuts.
So every solution has a potential downside. It's all connected.
It is, yeah. And that's why these conversations are so important, to look at things from all angles, weigh the pros and cons, and hold those in power accountable for what they decide.
These articles also talked about Doge modernizing government technology, right? Using things like cloud computing and AI.
Yep, the idea is that tech can make things faster, cut down on paperwork, and make government services more accessible to everyone.
Sounds pretty good. But what about cybersecurity, data privacy? And could these systems be biased?
Totally legitimate concerns. We need strong safeguards and oversight as these technologies are rolled out.
So Doge takes a step forward, and it creates a whole new set of challenges. It's like a minefield out there.
It kind of is. And it reminds us that governing is never simple. It's constantly changing. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and there are always trade-offs.
So as we wrap up this part of our depth dive, what should our listeners take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that efficiency isn't some magic solution. It's not a goal in itself. It's a tool that needs to be used carefully and strategically.
Meaning, don't just think about saving money. Think about the effects on democracy, transparency, accountability, fairness, the whole picture.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, making government run better, but also making sure it truly serves all the people.
Makes sense. So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, keep that in mind. We'll be looking at the long-term impact of Doge's actions. What does it all mean for the future of the U.S. government?
And we'll encourage you to think about, what do you want from government? What role do you want it to play in your life? What do you expect from the people you elect?
You know, going through all this, it really strikes me how this Doge thing is kind of like a symptom of something bigger.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like we're in this time where nobody trusts anything anymore.
Yeah.
Not just government, but the media, big tech, everything.
Right. Like everyone feels like the system is rigged. Somehow it's all failing us, the
Yeah.
things that are supposed to be working for us.
Yeah, and there's so many things feeding into that. I mean, social media with all the echo chambers and fake news hasn't helped. Then you've got like the rich getting richer, the political divide getting wider. It all makes people feel like they're getting screwed.
So Musk and Doge are tapping into that, right? That distrust. It's like they're offering this simple solution. Cut the waste, clean up the mess, shake things up.
And it's appealing, especially to people who feel like the old way of doing things just isn't working. But as we've been talking about, it's not that simple. There are some real risks, especially when you start messing with democracy and accountability.
Because at the end of the day, government isn't just some big bad bureaucracy that needs to be destroyed. It does important things, protects our rights, provides services, helps solve problems.
Yeah.
We need it.
Exactly. Efficiency is good, but it can't be the only goal. We have to figure out how to make government better without tearing down the things that make it legitimate and actually work.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Making things run smoother, but not at the expense of democracy. How do we get there? What are the next steps?
Well, I think the first thing is to admit that this is a complicated problem. No easy answers, no magic bullets. We can't get sucked in by people who promise quick fixes.
It's about having these tough conversations about what government should be, what challenges we're facing, and the best way to tackle them, listening to different viewpoints, even the ones we don't like.
Absolutely. And we have to hold our leaders accountable, make sure they're being transparent and actually working for us.
It's going to be hard. It's going to take time and patience and a willingness to compromise from everyone.
But I do think we can build a better future. A future where government works well and serves everyone. A future where democracy and justice actually mean something.
That's a future worth fighting for. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the most important thing for our listeners to remember is we have the power to shape the future. It's not predetermined. It's made by the choices we make, the things we do, and the conversations we have.
So let's make good choices. Be brave and keep those conversations going.
This deep dive into Elon Musk, Doge, and the future of government has been really eye-opening. It's a story that's still being written, and we'll definitely be following it closely.
In the meantime, stay curious, get involved, and keep asking the tough questions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.